Do you guys want to see my impression of a Democratic representative who's been watching minorities get brutalized by ICE for the past year? Oh shit! Oh, god damn! They are so underfunded. Oh, wow.
This is unconstitutional. We must protect our democracy.
Great. How are you going to do that?
Justice will be served.
Cool. When?
This is not who we are as a country.
Okay.
We need to save America.
Yes, we agree. Go do that.
I just need $5.
Slavery lasted over 200 years. Because progress takes time.
You know how many strongly worded letters I could write with this bad boy?
We're the Democrats. We protect trans people. Or protect sports from trans people. What the is gonna make y'all for us? You're so needy!
A woman's right to choose is so important, and we're trying to legislate that. But it's a tough and difficult process.
I just passed the Fuck You Die Act. It's an act where you get fucked and die.
You can't afford a single-payer system. We just can't. It's just too much money, and
Hey there, if you join my new personal army, you get paid $100,000 each and $50,000 sign-on bonus, and you get to kidnap people and you can kill people.
Guys, I'm just a little baby. I can't do anything. I can't pass anything. I can't do anything. I'm just a little baby.
I can do literally anything.
$1 trillion to Israel.
$1 trillion to Israel.
You just watched a short compilation of hilarious Gen Z TikTokers that I put together who tried to satirize the modern-day Democratic Party. And I mean no disrespect when I say try, because those skits were great. It's just that we've reached a point where the Democratic Party's supposed resistance to Trump's fascism is so embarrassingly pathetic that it's almost impossible to parody them because their behavior is indistinguishable from satire at this point. Take this 2020 tweet from Ben Rosen, for example, where in response to Republicans having the military abduct protesters and throw them in unmarked vans, he says the Democratic Party's response would be to mark the vans. And that's essentially their response to Trump's ICE Gestapo, because rather than calling for the entire agency to be abolished, which is what we all want, here's just one of the solutions that they've cooked up.
So I have legislation that would require ICE agents and Border Patrol to wear uniforms that contain QR codes, which you could scan from a distance to avoid physical contact with those officers. And that would generate a digital ID that would contain the name of the officer, the badge number, and the agency to which the officer belongs. And that would bring greater accountability and transparency to policing.
Do you see what I mean? They are beyond parody. Like, imagine doing that in real life. Excuse me, officer, do you mind holding still while I scan your QR code? Because I do want to report you to Secretary Kristi Noem immediately, and I'm sure she will take disciplinary action when she finds out how uncouth your behavior has been, sir. Like, bro, they're going to tell you to fuck off and then blast you in the face point blank with chemical weapons. What is this supposed to accomplish? I mean, the thought process that goes into some of these solutions that they cook up is just mind-boggling to me. But I mean, this is the game that Democrats always play. A popular sentiment emerges. This time it's a call for abolishing ICE. And rather than riding that wave, Democrats find a way to suppress that popular movement. They did this with Medicare for All. They did this with marijuana legalization. They even did it with a literal genocide in Gaza. And as Michael Denzel Smith put it in this op-ed for The Intercept, abolish ICE is more popular than ever. How will Democrats drop the ball this time? And I love how there's not even an assumption by anyone anymore, including journalists, that Democrats are going to even try to do the right thing or even the politically smart thing, because we all know that there's no point in getting our hopes up because they simply won't. They will not do what we want under any circumstances ever. As Russell Payne of Salon reports, Democratic leadership is explicitly opposing calls to abolish ICE in favor of reforms. And Michael Denzel Smith explains that other Democrats in prominent positions of power are also on the same page. He writes, few, if any, of the Democratic Party's power brokers are willing to side with the likes of progressives like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has held steadfast in her support of shutting ICE down. Senator Chris Murphy, the top Democrat on Appropriations Subcommittee, which oversees the Department of Homeland Security's budget, told protesters outside of an ICE office in Washington that their goal should be to make ICE comply with the law. Representative Darren Soto dismissed the idea of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus working to terminate ICE. So after the ICE Gestapo, which is President Neck Pussy's personal paramilitary at this point, executed a person in broad daylight and continues to terrorize communities by going door to door to hunt down immigrants, Democrats, the so-called resistance, aren't even willing to entertain the idea of abolishing ICE. Even the mayor of the city that is currently being occupied is opposed to the idea.
Do you support abolishing ICE?
I do not support abolishing ICE. However, I absolutely oppose the way that this administration is conducting themselves with us.
So he's not opposed to the existence of ICE per se, it's just that he's opposed to the way that the Gestapo is doing Gestapo-like things. Mind you, he's not going to do anything to stop the things that they're doing that he doesn't like, aside from using naughty words, but even that is a little bit too extreme for our liberal media establishment.
You went on national television and you said to ICE, get the F out of Minneapolis. Do you regret that language? I mean, that doesn't sound like turning the temperature down.
Mr. Mayor, sir, you said that the gas chambers are, quote, fucking killing people, it seems. Is it really necessary to use such profanity when describing mass atrocities? Like, this is part of the reason why our so-called opposition party is so weak, because the remaining non-conservative media institutions that we still have are focused on tone policing the meaningless gestures of useless politicians and treating their inaction as if even that is too much. The ICE Gestapo is going door to door, and they are now executing people in the streets and strangling people in concentration camps. I think it's time to wake the fuck up and stop worrying about trivial things like language. But that's the thing. They're never going to wake up. And Democrats aren't thinking of ways that they're going to use their eventual power to carry out the will of the people, because they're instead trying to find ways to meet the fascists halfway and then subsequently pitch said collaboration with fascists to us as progress. So that way we feel like we're getting something from them. Case in point, just listen to 2028 frontrunner Gavin Newsom's embarrassing capitulation to Ben Shapiro.
AOC said this week that ICE should be abolished. You disagree?
Oh, I disagree when I think a candidate for president by the name of Harris said that in the last campaign. I came out, I remember being on Chris Hayes hours later saying, I think that's a mistake. So absolutely.
And then your press office tweeted out that it was state-sponsored terrorism, which, I mean, Governor, I do have to ask you about that. Yeah. That sort of thing makes our politics worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it does.
Yeah.
I mean, our ICE officers obviously are not terrorists.
Yeah.
A tragic situation is not state-sponsored terrorism.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Humiliating. This is supposed to be the next leader of the Democratic Party. Oh, and before that, Gavin Newsom was boasting about vetoing a bill that would have prevented him from cooperating with ICE. And at a different point in the podcast, Ben Shapiro got him to deny Israel's genocide in Gaza. Not that he ever recognized it in the first place, but he just explicitly said with his full chest that he disagrees with international human rights groups and scholars about what we can all see with our own eyes. Might as well eat out Ben's bussy while you're at it, Gavin, because you're very clearly willing to give him whatever he wants, because this is what Democrats do. But I just want to step back really and let what we just saw marinate for a second. The next potential leader of the Democratic Party is a genocide-denying fascist collaborator, and he's not doing this behind the scenes. We're not getting a report about this from an anonymous source. He is publicly doing this shit in front of our fucking eyes and expects people to vote for him. We're doing so great as a party, man. But let's humor Democrats for a second and assume that reforming ICE would actually suffice, even though that's not the case. But assuming that they're able to recapture control of the government, what kind of reforms would they actually propose to try to placate the base that's insisting that the entire agency be abolished? You would think it'd have to be pretty significant, so that way they at least try to meet us halfway, since they're not giving us what we want. Well, that's not actually the case. I say that because here's what Cory Booker, another influential Democrat who's probably going to run for president in 2028, is proposing.
We must do more. The tragic death of Renee Good has brought into clear spotlight so many of the things the Trump administration is doing to make our communities less safe. I'm continuing to lead new legislation that will bring further high professional standards and accountability to ICE officials. We must also set minimum training standards. We must ban the hiring of anyone affiliated with hate groups. We must hold agency leaders accountable. We must require every federal officer to wear a body-worn camera during public-facing enforcement actions and require that footage be preserved so that the truth can't be hidden or destroyed.
Yeah, except the problem is that the criminal who executed included Renee Good, who the regime is now protecting, filmed himself doing it. And everybody is just denying what we all saw with our own eyes. So I'm not necessarily sure that more cameras are going to do the trick, especially given how police officers who do have them just turn them off before they commit crimes and brutalize people. Like, the regime told them that they have absolute immunity, and they're very clearly protecting them even when they commit murder in broad daylight. So I feel like they're not going to be on their best behavior if they have body cameras. Oh, and I love the idea that ICE would somehow be better if they had more training. Actually, no, I don't think it's a good idea to give the Gestapo even more training. It's not that, you know, they don't know how to de-escalate. It's that they want to escalate because this entire organization is composed of complete extremists who are beholden to Donald Trump. Like, they are seeking out people who are extreme. As for holding these Nazis accountable, in theory, that one actually sounds great, but the devil is in the details. What kind of accountability are we talking about here? And for the record, I do understand that Democrats wouldn't be able to abolish ICE now, even if they wanted to, but we're asking them in the short term to at least try to fight. Use the little leverage that they have to try to claw back at least some of the funding and do something to try to ensure that there's a little bit of accountability in the short term until they can retake power. But they're not even doing the bare minimum. They're proposing useless half measures to make it look like they're doing something so we stop nagging them. But to add insult to injury, they're not even willing to fight for the half measures that they're proposing to try to placate us. Like, listen to what Booker said when he was asked about potentially shutting down the government to force Republicans to include accountability measures in their upcoming appropriations bill. Just get a load of this shit.
So we could say things like shutting down the government. We saw what happened. We had the longest government shutdown in the world. Democrats could not hold together to sustain that kind of pressure. What I am saying right now is we, the people, because the power of the people is greater than the people in the power, more people are going to have to put pressure on Republicans who are getting closer and closer to their re-elections.
It's so sad, it's almost funny. Why would we expect the people in power to do something when we all know that that's the job of the people that know power? They're the ones who have to step up and pressure Republicans, not senators. And I mean, if he really believed that, then wouldn't he want to use the connections and power that he has as a senator to get labor leaders and faith leaders and activists together to formulate some kind of a plan to actually apply pressure on this regime? Well, of course not, because he doesn't want to set the expectation too high and get people to think that senators are actually supposed to do things. That would be crazy. Look, at this point, I'm sure that we're all well aware of the game that they play every single time, right? They coast by doing less than the bare minimum until the next election, and then they cross their fingers and hope that by then Americans are so tired of Republican fuckery that they come running back to Democrats with open arms at the next election. In fact, the more pain Republicans cause, the more opportunities Democrats will have to fundraise off of our anger. Mark Kelly can send us 5 more text messages a day about how the Trump administration is politically persecuting him. Alyssa Slotkin can text us again and tell us that a $25 donation is going to help her fight Trump even harder. Fascism is a boon to their business, and everybody knows this. And it feels pointless to even entertain the prospect of them ever even considering the abolition of ICE in the first place, seeing as how the more likely outcome is that they're going to side with Republicans to increase ICE funding. I say this because, as journalist Pablo Manriquez points out, Senate Democrats got steamrolled once again by Republicans with an appropriations bill that adds millions of dollars in funding to DHS's ICE budget without any additional riders requiring them to unmask or wear badges. Now, at the time that I record this video, we don't know how many Democrats are going to support this. It seems like progressives are actually holding strong. Having said that, though, would we be surprised if a very large number of Democrats supported this? We wouldn't, right? We shouldn't be, if that's the case. We all know that a large portion of Democrats are going to vote for this and then sell it to us by saying that they won other useless concessions that we weren't asking for in other areas. This is what Rosa Delauro, the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, is already doing, even though she just said last week that she opposes ICE funding. But don't take it from me, she was pretty unequivocal about this.
I am going to set the record straight. I do not support an increase in ICE funding. Can I repeat that? I do not support increasing funding for ICE.
That's very reassuring. The problem is that fast forward to today, and she's already rationalizing a vote to, you guessed it, increase ICE funding. The Hill reports, in endorsing a bill that would carry forward a huge spike in funding to ICE, Representative Rosa Delauro, the senior Democrat on the House Appropriations Committee, acknowledged it excludes most of the ICE reforms Democrats have demanded since the January 7th shooting of Renee Good in Minneapolis. But a shutdown or a short-term spending patch, she argued, would be worse. Per Common Dream, she added, I understand that many of my Democratic colleagues may be dissatisfied with any bill that funds ICE. I share their frustration with the out-of-control agency, Delauro said, while also stressing that the bill is more than just ICE. She specifically pointed to funding for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Transportation Security Administration, and the U.S. Coast Guard. So I get that you're disappointed that the bill increases funding for ICE, but it also includes funding for the U.S. Coast Guard. Huh? You excited about that? That's pretty cool, huh? I mean, what am I supposed to even say? I shouldn't have to say this, but I couldn't give two shits about the motherfucking Coast Guard when state-sponsored terrorists are occupying U.S. cities. Like, they don't understand the gravity of the situation. ICE just snatched a half-naked elderly man from his home and detained him, only to bring him back hours later after finding out that he is a U.S. citizen. Not that that kind of treatment would be acceptable to non-citizens, but when the barbarians have broken down the gates, you have to respond to that threat with the urgency that it requires. But time and again, Democrats are waving the white flag before the battle even begins. But as frustrating as it is to see them refuse to fight Republican fascists again and again and again, we have to remind ourselves that what we're witnessing, it's not incompetency, it's not stupidity, they're not out of touch. The Democratic Party, at least most of them, are choosing to not fight fascists because they are fascist collaborators. I'll say it again, they are fascist collaborators. For every AOC, there's about 20 or 30 John Fettermans. And I want you to test this theory, okay? If you have a Democratic representative, look at their statements about ICE, and then reference this graphic shared by Nina Turner to see if they were one of the 75 Democrats who voted to express gratitude for ICE back in 2025. And if you have a Democratic senator, take a look at what they're saying now, and then double check this roll call article to see if they were one of the 12 Democrats who voted with Republicans for the unconstitutional Lake and Riley Act, which stripped due process away from all immigrants, including Dreamers. You might even be surprised by some of those names, like Raphael Warnock, John Ossoff, and Ruben Gallego, because they're often portrayed in media as more progressive Democrats, but in actuality, when push comes to shove, they side with Republicans. Hell, I know that you've gotten at least 12 texts from Mark Kelly and Alyssa Slotkin, like I have, and based on those texts, you would assume that they're at the front lines of the resistance, when in actuality, these duplicitous cowards are partially responsible for the fascist mess that we're in right now in the first place. Just look at the way that Ruben Gallego pretended to oppose ICE after Jake Tapper pointed out that this man just voted to increase their funding last year.
A year ago, you voted to expand ICE funding. What are you going to do this week, this time? Because Democratic Senator Chris Murphy said, quote, Democrats cannot vote for a Department of Homeland Security budget that doesn't restrain the growing lawlessness of this agency.
Yeah, he's 100% right, and I'm talking to him. If we cannot vote for anything that actually adds more money and doesn't constrain ICE, it's not what what we want out of ICE. Again, we want a security force that is focused on targeting and deporting criminals. What they're doing right now is none of that.
So he definitely doesn't want to abolish ICE because it would be crazy to abolish an agency that was created in 2003. But what he wants is certain things out of ICE. And he's not getting those things. So he just wants ICE to meet his expectations. Great job. I'm sure that Trump is shaking in his boots when he sees how the opposition party is asserting their disappointment about the way that Nazis are doing Nazi shit. Like, this is why things are so bad right now. Because there's no check on Trump's tyranny. None. And I want to be clear, in calling Democrats fascist collaborators, I'm not trying to create a false equivalence between them and Republicans, because they are unquestionably less bad than Republicans in every conceivable way. And I still believe, as bad as they are, the worst Democrat is still preferable to the best Republican. So I don't subscribe to both sides of them because I genuinely don't believe that both sides are equally bad. Having said that, the Democratic Party's complicity with Republican cruelty is part of the reason why we're in this predicament in the first place. If they tried to use their power to fight the looming threat of fascism over the last couple of decades and tried to meaningfully address people's declining material conditions, I don't actually believe that people would have been desperate enough to fall for a fascist demagogue like Trump in the first place. So to the extent that we can boot Republicans from power for purposes of harm reduction, I'm all for that. I think we should try to do that. Elections do still matter, assuming that they're still free and fair, but let's not pretend like the Democratic Party is going to save us, because I'm afraid that that ship has sailed. Our only hope at this point is to bind together and use our labor as leverage while we still have that, because it's only a matter of time before AI takes the rest of our jobs. But the good news is that labor leaders and activists in Minneapolis are doing just that. On January 23rd, they're holding a general strike to drive ICE out of their state once and for all. They've agreed to do work stoppages, pause consumer spending, and not go to school in order to grind their state's economy to a halt, to send a message to political leaders that they're not going to tolerate this bullshit any longer. And some New Yorkers are even pledging to do the same in order to stand in solidarity with Minneapolis. And something like this can't be successful unless enough people do it, because in order to have leverage over the economy, you need people to turn out in big numbers. Because, if protesting doesn't get the attention of leaders, then hitting their donors where it hurts the most will, which is their wallets. So in order to make an impact, to make a dent in the economy, cripple it potentially, you need a lot of people to get involved. So this is going to be something to watch very closely, because if they're successful here, maybe it can happen at the national level. Who knows? But there does need to be organizational muscle behind this and a coherent set of demands. Otherwise, it's just not going to be successful. It's very difficult to pull off. But the way you build support for something like this is to get the rest of the country to see that politics as usual is not going to save us. Hoping for the manifestation of a democratic savior is not going to do anything. If you think that that's the case, then hope in one hand and shit in the other and see which one fills up faster. It's time for all of us to recognize that a new, radical form of politics is what is required to address the threat posed by radical fascists. And on that note, I'm going to leave you with a clip from comedian Jeffrey Asmus, who is going to explain why Americans need to once and for all shed their centrism and milquetoast liberalism, because it's simply not going to cut it at a time when fascists have already conquered the country. So enjoy.
You can't be liberal anymore. You got to go further left than the Democrats right now. They've given up on us. We got to move. Because liberals are such fucking losers. I can't be part of that bullshit. They're such pussies. Liberals, like when Republicans get mad, they form a militia and storm the Capitol. When liberals get mad, they knit a hat that says, "Fuck Trump." It's just so embarrassing. Liberals still think art is powerful. Isn't that so embarrassing? Like, my poetry will stop fascism. It's like, buy a fucking gun or shut up. I'm done.